Listen closely. There is a quiet truth moving through the world right now, unnoticed, often misunderstood. Many see a woman living alone and assume absence. They assume lack. They assume something unfinished. Yet silence carries teachings that noise can never reveal. In Shaolin practice, solitude was never punishment. Solitude was training. It was the place where the mind stopped hiding. Today, I open a door rarely spoken about. This video explores the deeper reality behind women who choose to live alone without a man. Not through opinion, not through emotion, through discipline, awareness, and ancient understanding. You will learn why solitude strengthens presence rather than weakening it. You will see how silence sharpens perception. You will discover why independence begins inside long before it shows in lifestyle or choices. Many teachings were never shared openly. In the Shaolin tradition, certain truths were reserved for those ready to sit with discomfort. Living alone accelerates this process. It strips distraction. It reveals attachment. It trains emotional regulation through direct experience. These lessons rarely appear in modern discussions, yet they shape true self-mastery. Stay until the end because the final insight changes the entire meaning of companionship. Not from rejection, not from fear, but from inner order. When peace no longer depends on another person, connection transforms into choice rather than need. That distinction changes everything. This is not about isolation. This is about presence. This is not about rejecting love. This is about cultivating wholeness first. Through Shaolin wisdom, mindfulness, and lived discipline, this video reveals a perspective most never pause long enough to see. Welcome to Heng Yi Chronicles, a place for calm strength, ancient truth, and inner mastery. Subscribe to this channel and continue walking this path with us. Watch carefully how the mind searches for relief. Many believe freedom appears when circumstances change, when people leave or arrive, when doors close or open. Yet in Shaolin teachings, freedom was never found in movement. It was found in stillness. A woman may live alone and still be trapped. Another may share space with no one and feel deeply free. The difference is not the room, it is the relationship with her own emotions. Living alone does not automatically create strength. Strength is trained. In the temple, monks were separated from familiar comfort, not to glorify isolation, but to reveal dependency. When no one is present to calm the storm must be understood. Emotional regulation cannot be borrowed forever. It must be cultivated. Many unknowingly use others as anchors for their inner state, a voice to soothe anxiety, a presence to soften fear, a reaction to confirm worth. This is not connection. This is reliance. Shaolin discipline teaches that reliance weakens clarity. When emotions rise and there is no one to absorb them, awareness sharpens. One begins to observe instead of react. This is where strength quietly forms. Living alone places a mirror directly in front of the mind. Restlessness appears more clearly. Loneliness speaks louder. Old patterns surface without disguise. In this space, a choice emerges. One can escape through distraction or remain and train steadiness. Shaolin masters did not remove students from others to make them strong. They removed the exits. Freedom begins the moment emotional stability no longer depends on another person's presence or absence. When calm is self-generated, relationships become lighter. When peace is internal, attachment loosens. Strength is not loud here. It is calm breathing during discomfort. It is patience without reassurance. It is the ability to sit with one's own heart without asking it to change. This is inner freedom, not separation from others, but independence from emotional dependency. Silence is rarely empty. It only feels that way to those who have not learned how to listen. When conversation fades and the world quiets, something deeper begins to move. Thoughts rise without interruption. Emotions no longer hide behind laughter or routine. In ancient traditions, silence was never treated as absence. it was treated as a mirror. Mindfulness practice teaches that the mind reveals itself most clearly when it is not entertained. In silence, patterns surface. The same worries return. The same memories knock again. The same longings repeat their familiar rhythm. Noise usually softens these encounters. Silence removes the cushion. What remains is honesty, not the kind that is spoken, but the kind that is felt. Women who live alone often meet this space daily. Without constant conversation to redirect attention, the mind has nowhere to escape. This is not always comfortable. Old fears may appear stronger at first. Attachments become visible. A desire for validation, a resistance to stillness, a habit of seeking reassurance. These discoveries are not failures, they are signals. Ancient disciplines did not rush to quiet the mind. They allowed it to reveal itself. Through observation, not suppression, silence trained awareness the same way repetition trained the body. Sitting with discomfort without interference builds a rare form of discipline. It teaches patience with inner movement. It teaches steadiness without distraction. Over time, something shifts. The mind begins to settle on its own. Emotional waves lose intensity when they are not fed. Fear weakens when it is observed instead of resisted. Silence becomes familiar rather than threatening. It no longer demands escape. It invites presence. Those surrounded by constant noise may never notice these inner layers. Sound can protect the ego. Silence exposes it. Living alone removes that protection. What replaces it is clarity, not dramatic, not sudden, quiet and precise. A deeper relationship with the self forms, built not on comfort, but on awareness. When there is no one nearby to receive the weight of emotion, something essential is revealed. Reactions that were once released through words, expressions, or shared presence now remain within. This moment is often mistaken for pressure, yet ancient discipline views it as training. Without an outlet, emotion asks to be understood rather than discharged. Shaolin teachings place reaction before circumstance. The outer world cannot be shaped until the inner response is steady. When anger arises, when sadness lingers, when restlessness moves through the body, the practice is not to remove the trigger, but to regulate the response. Living alone removes the familiar escape. There is no immediate comfort, no shared regulation, only awareness and breath. At first, this can feel overwhelming. Emotions appear louder without witnesses. The mind searches for relief, yet with repetition, a subtle strength develops. One learns to pause before speaking, even when no one is listening. One learns to soften tension without distraction. This is the early form of mastery, quiet, unrecognized, but deeply transformative. Ancient training halls were designed to produce this exact condition: discomfort without rescue, stillness without reassurance. Through this, practitioners learn that emotions rise and fall naturally when not fed by reaction. Control was never force, it was timing, a moment of space between impulse and action. Living alone accelerates this lesson because it offers daily practice. Every challenge becomes internal, a difficult day, an unsettling thought, a surge of emotion at night. Each moment asks the same question: will reaction lead, or will awareness remain? Over time, steadiness replaces urgency. Emotional storms shorten, self-trust grows. One no longer needs another person to carry emotional weight. Calm becomes self-generated. Circumstances may remain unchanged, but the inner response has shifted. This is where true self-mastery begins. Reliance often feels gentle at first. Another person becomes a place to rest emotions, decisions, and direction. Over time, this comfort can quietly delay growth. Ancient teachings observed this pattern long before modern life. Shaolin philosophy did not reject connection, but it warned against dependency. When peace depends on another, stability becomes fragile. Living alone removes this arrangement. There is no one else to organize the day, to soften uncertainty, or to carry emotional rhythm. responsibility shifts inward. Routine must be chosen. Order must be created. Calm must be cultivated deliberately. This transition is not sudden. It unfolds through small daily decisions made without external reinforcement. In Shaolin training, students were taught that discipline begins where support ends, not as punishment, but as preparation. When no one corrects posture, posture must be self-corrected. When no one enforces schedule, time must be respected from within. This principle extends beyond physical practice. Emotional habits are trained the same way. Living alone reveals how often stability was borrowed rather than built. Mood was once influenced by another's presence. Motivation once followed shared energy. Without these anchors, the mind searches for structure. At first, inconsistency appears, then awareness grows. Gradually, inner authority forms. Peace gained this way is different. It does not depend on harmony with another person. It survives disruption. Routine becomes grounding rather than restrictive. Simple actions carry weight. Waking, eating, resting, reflecting. Each becomes an act of alignment. Ancient perspectives viewed this inward shift as maturation. Responsibility for inner life marks the transition from reliance to readiness. Living alone accelerates this process by removing delay. Stability is no longer negotiated. It is practiced. Through this, strength becomes rooted, not reactive. A steady center forms, capable of connection without losing balance. When there is no audience, the true nature of discipline is revealed. No one is watching, no one is reminding. Actions are no longer shaped by expectation or approval. In ancient training, this condition was essential. Shaolin mastery was never measured by performance, but by what continued when structure disappeared. Discipline that depends on observation is fragile. It fades when attention moves elsewhere. True discipline is quiet. It operates without praise. Living alone creates this environment naturally. There is no external rhythm to follow, no shared schedule to lean on. What remains is choice, repeated daily without witness. At first, inconsistency may appear. The mind tests boundaries, small delays, missed routines, excuses spoken only inwardly. This phase is not failure, it is exposure. Ancient teachings understood that isolation reveals habits more clearly than instruction. Without correction, self-honesty becomes the guide. Women who live alone often discover that consistency is built in silence, waking at the same time, maintaining order without urgency, caring for the body without reminder. These acts appear ordinary, yet they form the backbone of self-mastery. Repetition without recognition strengthens will in a way motivation never can. In Shaolin tradition, students practice forms alone long before they were allowed to demonstrate them. Mastery grew where no one could applaud. The same principle applies here. Discipline practiced in isolation becomes internal authority. It no longer needs enforcement. Over time, effort softens. Routine stabilizes. What once required will becomes natural rhythm. This is quiet power. Not rigid, not severe, steady and reliable. When discipline survives isolation, it becomes part of identity. Living alone does not create this strength, but it reveals and refines it. In that space, self-discipline stops being an act and becomes a way of being. Discomfort is often misunderstood as a sign to retreat. Ancient teachings saw it differently. In Shaolin practice, discomfort was approached with attention, not avoidance. It was entered slowly, deliberately, with steadiness. This was how hidden weaknesses were revealed and transformed. Loneliness, when it appears, carries information. It exposes what has not yet been resolved, a longing for reassurance, a fear of being forgotten, an identity once shaped around another's presence. These sensations are rarely created by being alone. They are uncovered by it. Noise and companionship often soften these edges. Solitude sharpens them. Living alone removes the distance between feeling and awareness. There is no one to distract, no immediate comfort to absorb unease. In this space, loneliness becomes a teacher. It points toward unmet needs and unexamined attachments. Ancient perspectives did not label this experience as negative. They treated it as diagnostic. In disciplined practice, one does not rush to escape discomfort. The body is observed. The breath is steadied. The sensation is allowed to exist without story. Over time, the fear behind loneliness begins to loosen. What seemed overwhelming reveals itself as temporary movement, not identity. This is where inner mastery develops. The ability to remain present with difficult states builds resilience that cannot be borrowed. Emotional strength forms not through avoidance, but through familiarity. Discomfort loses its authority when it is no longer feared. Living alone becomes a mirror reflecting inner structure. It shows where reliance once existed. It shows where self-definition was incomplete. This reflection is not judgment, it is clarity. Punishment implies wrongdoing, a mirror implies truth. Through this process, loneliness transforms. It becomes less about absence and more about awareness. What remains is not emptiness but understanding. In learning to sit with discomfort, one learns to trust inner ground. This trust becomes the foundation for stability, with or without companionship. When validation fades, a deeper question appears. Without another person reflecting worth, back through words or attention, the mind begins to search inward. This moment can feel uncertain at first, yet ancient wisdom viewed it as essential. Shaolin teachings did not encourage dependence on praise. Respect was earned through consistency, restraint, and alignment between intention and action. Self-worth built on approval is unstable. It rises and falls with opinion. Living alone removes this fluctuation. There is no daily affirmation from a partner, no reassurance during doubt. What remains is conduct, how one moves through the day, how promises are kept, how challenges are met when no one is observing. In disciplined traditions, respect was never requested. It was embodied. One stood correctly, one acted responsibly. Over time, confidence formed without announcement. The same principle applies here. A woman living alone learns that worth does not require explanation. It is expressed quietly through self-care, boundaries, and integrity. This shift changes posture. Decisions are no longer filtered through how they will be received. Choices become simpler, clearer. There is less need to justify space, pace, or direction. Approval loses its urgency. Inner alignment becomes the reference point. Standing firm does not mean becoming rigid. It means remaining steady when questioned internally. It means trusting one's values without constant reinforcement. Ancient perspectives considered this maturity, a stage where the self no longer seeks permission to exist as it is. Over time, this internal grounding becomes visible, not through words, but through presence. There is less hesitation, less self-negotiation. Self-respect deepens because it is practiced daily, not granted externally. Living alone trains this quietly. It teaches how to stand without leaning, how to move without explanation, and how to remain whole without needing to be witnessed. Time is rarely neutral. It is shaped by attention, by expectation, and by the movement of those around us. In Shaolin practice, every moment was treated as training: the rising sun, the steps along the hall, the sweep of the floor, each measured, deliberate, purposeful. Time was not something to fill, it was something to inhabit fully, to bend toward growth. Living alone mirrors this ancient lesson. Without constant social interaction or emotional negotiation, the usual currents that pull attention outward are absent. Moments that once vanished in chatter or compromise are now free. They stretch quietly, inviting reflection. A simple hour becomes an opportunity to observe thought patterns, to notice the body, to assess habits without interference. This reclamation of time is subtle but transformative. Days no longer slip unnoticed into nights. Meals, rest, and movement are attended with intention. Even small routines, waking, cleaning, preparing, are reframed as practices of discipline. The mind begins to align with the rhythm of presence rather than obligation. In the monastery, time itself was a teacher. Mistakes were noted not for blame, but as a mirror of attention and effort. Similarly, living alone exposes wasted moments and unexamined distractions. It provides the space to reorganize priorities, to cultivate health of body and mind, and to restore internal order that is often hidden beneath social noise. This process is not hurried. It does not demand extraordinary effort. Instead, it unfolds quietly. One begins to see how attention shapes experience, how consistency builds resilience, and how stillness nurtures clarity. Time is no longer a series of tasks, but a vessel for growth. In solitude, each hour becomes a canvas. Each choice becomes an act of training. Presence deepens, awareness sharpens, and slowly, life aligns with the rhythm of inner mastery rather than external expectation. Peace that depends on another is delicate, shifting like water in a cup. A kind word, a gesture, a presence. Each can lift it, but each can also disturb it. Ancient wisdom recognized this fragility. True calm does not rise from external approval or comfort. It grows from steadiness within, cultivated through attention, breath, and mindful observation. Mindfulness teaches that peace is a choice rather than a reward. It is not granted by harmony or circumstance. It is discovered by noticing thought without judgment, by allowing emotion to pass without grasping, and by returning again and again to the quiet center of awareness. Over time, this practice forms an inner environment that remains resilient, even when outer conditions fluctuate. Women who live alone experience this principle daily. Without a partner's presence to soothe anxiety or mediate stress, peace must be generated from within. At first, the absence may feel sharp, even uncomfortable. Old habits of reliance surface. Tension emerges in moments that were once softened by another, yet these very moments become training. Each challenge is an invitation to cultivate stability without external support. Over weeks and months, subtle changes appear, decisions are made with greater clarity, emotions rise and fall without hijacking the day, habits form around intention rather than reaction. A home, once merely a space, transforms into a reflection of inner calm. Quiet routines, mindful pauses, and simple rituals anchor the mind. This inner stability is not loud or dramatic. It is gentle, consistent, and unshakable. It creates freedom to engage with others without dependence, to experience connection without clinging, and to navigate the world without losing ground. Peace, once practiced internally, no longer wavers with circumstance. It becomes a steady presence, a silent strength that supports life rather than reacting to it. Identity often hides behind labels. When the world defines a person by roles, titles, or relationships, the self becomes intertwined with expectation. Ancient Shaolin philosophy offered a different path. Being comes before becoming. Mastery begins not with recognition or position, but with presence. It begins with meeting oneself honestly, without the filters imposed by society. Living alone creates the space for this encounter. Without the constant reference of a partner, the mind is free to explore its own boundaries, desires, and values. Habits and patterns once shaped by others come into focus. Choices are no longer guided by relational expectation, but by inner alignment. This solitude does not isolate, it reveals. It allows the self to emerge more fully, layer by layer. At first, this process may feel uncertain. Without the mirror of another's perception, questions of worth or identity can surface sharply. Yet discomfort is part of the path. Shaolin teachings honor the journey through challenge rather than its avoidance. Reflection, meditation, and careful observation turn uncertainty into insight. Over time, The absence of external definition cultivates clarity and groundedness. Living alone encourages the cultivation of skills and qualities that are independent of validation, self-discipline, awareness, and emotional steadiness. Each decision, each small act of care or reflection reinforces a deeper sense of who one is. Identity ceases to be borrowed from relationships or social expectation. It becomes self-authored. This deeper self is not bound by titles or roles. It does not need explanation or justification. It moves through the world with quiet authority, rooted in understanding rather than performance. Living alone allows a woman to meet herself fully, to observe her nature without distortion, and to step into life as her own measure. Here, presence precedes everything else, and being becomes the foundation for all that follows.